She wants you to listen to her. She would want you to perhaps paraphrase back what she said so she would know that A, you listened to her, and B, you actually understand what she said. Because if she were here, she would say, well, a lot of times when I talk to him, I think he's listening to me, but I know after the fact he didn't hear a damn word I said. So you would want to listen to her. And when I say listen to her, I mean stop what you're doing. Put your phone down, or pull your computer over to the side, or put the TV on mute, whatever you got to do. Stop, unless you're saving a baby from drowning in the backyard pool. Stop what you're doing when she's talking to you about something that might be important, and at least pause for a few seconds and look in her direction so that you can give her the indication that you're actually paying attention and that you're present. Those are two key terms, guys. She wants to know that you're paying attention. She wants to know that you're present. And then when she expresses a feeling, even though you may not understand what she means when she's expressing her feeling, at least you can say, okay, well, I understand that you're upset about that, or I understand that you're disturbed about this. So you're not only listening and paraphrasing back what she said so that you give her the indication that you understand, you're also kind of validating her feelings and her whatever else that she's trying to convey. You're validating that. But it's listening, paraphrasing back, so that she'll know that you not only listen, but you understand, and that you're validating her situation, her feelings, her thoughts, whatever that is. So that's the three prongs there. Listen, prove to her you understand, and validate her feelings. I would ask for you guys to ask your wife if she would do you a favor. And you should do this today. Here's the script you can use. You're talking to your NT wife. I want to start listening to you and paying attention to what you have to say because you're important to me. And so could you do me a favor? And could we adopt this scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is something that you're telling me is kind of important, but it's not emergent, and it's maybe doesn't even require my response, but it's still something you want me to listen to. And 5 is what you're telling me is super important, and I need to really pay attention and give you my 100% full attention because it's like a super important thing. And most women will be willing to do that. Most women will be perfectly happy to say, okay, well, I'll do that. And then, so later this evening, she says, well, I wanted to mention something to you, and this is a level 2. Okay, and now you know that it's something that's important to her, but it's not like a big, crucial, emergent thing. Have the conversation with your NT wife sometime today and say, I want to do a new thing. I want to start paying attention to your wants and your needs and your feelings and your thoughts. And it would be helpful to me if you would give me a scale from 1 to 5. 1 is it's important, but it's not something that you necessarily need me to take action on. You just want me to listen to it. 5, it's super important, and I really need to listen, and it's probably something you need me to take action on. And 3 is somewhere in the middle. So when you're going to tell me something that's relatively important, just give it a rating from 1 to 5 so I'll know how important it is, because I want to start paying attention. If she goes, well, I feel this way about that, and she expects you to take how she feels and apply it to some action that you're supposed to implement, that's going to be difficult. So one of the things you can say would be helpful to me if you would just come right out and tell me what you need instead of putting me in a situation where I have to guess how you feel or guess what I'm supposed to do based on how you feel or read your mind about what you need. Just point blank, come right out and tell me what you need. You said that sometimes she feels like it's just a lot of work to explain. As a general rule of thumb, you could say with the business of over-explaining and she gets tired of doing that, then here's your line again. It would be helpful to me if instead of giving me a lengthy explanation, if you could just give me like the summary or the main point. So you're not accusing her of doing anything wrong when you say it would be helpful to me, and you're asking her 2 things. 1, just tell me what you need so I don't have to read my wife's emotions and figure it out. And also it would be helpful to me if you could summarize the main point or main points, and that would save you from a lengthy explanation, because I'm sure that a 10-minute conversation, this is hard for them to do because the female NT brain doesn't think like this. But it would be possible to take a 10-minute monologue and whittle it down to a 10-second main point. She's not going to like doing that because she thinks she's got a data dump on you. That's how they think. The more data, the better, because that's how they think. When they're trying to figure stuff out and they're listening to somebody else, they want as much data as you can pour it on, because that helps them with their processing and decision making and understanding of stuff. It doesn't work like that for the ASD man. Data dumping ends up in meltdowns and shutdowns, or just in false agreement. Yeah, honey, I hear what you're saying. Sure, yeah. I'll do it. Right. But then we get into trouble because you just agreed to get the conversation over with, and then you missed the good message, or you missed something that you were supposed to do. And so now we got to go face that issue at some point.
Hey guys, this is Mark Hutten with AdultAspergersChat.com, and I wanted to talk to you briefly today about how to get your Asperger's partner to share the load. One of the things that I always run into when I counsel couples where one person has Asperger's syndrome and the other one is a neurotypical, usually it's the wife that's the NT and the husband that has Asperger's syndrome, is this problem of sharing responsibilities. It's often the case where the NT wife feels that she is taking the lion's share of the load and the husband is kind of slacking off. And that's very common, and those NT women that are watching this video, I'm sure you've experienced that. So you do want to allow your Asperger's husband, in this case, to take on some adult responsibilities, of course, even if he doesn't live up to your standards. It's not uncommon for the Asperger's husband to step aside and let you take over because you want things done your way. And this is not letting him grow up. Remember that Asperger's syndrome is a developmental disorder. And so he is literally underdeveloped in the social emotional department. In other words, his social emotional brain is immature relative to his chronological age. So if you insist on being the ultimate decision maker or judgment caller, he's probably going to shut down and you're never going to get it done. So he may struggle and even fail a few times, but that's a learning curve. So you definitely do want to impress upon him the importance of sharing responsibilities. And one of the things that you can do to help out with this is to create a visual cue, even a chore chart. Because people with Asperger's syndrome are very visual in a verbal world, and they do much better when they can see something that reminds them visually. And I know that chore charts and budget sheets sound very childish, but he may need a visual reminder. We all have information overload with too much to do and remember. You know, even neurotypical men do much better when they're handed a honey-do list. So if your Asperger's husband is tech savvy, you can have him enter items in his reminder app. Or you could actually create a chore chart, just like you would a child. And I know that that sounds ridiculous at some level, but it works. The reason I know it works is because I regularly recommend this. And, you know, most cases, the wife says, yeah, I'm getting a little more out of him now than I did before we had the visual. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is to not ask him to do more than 1 or 2, 3 at the most things at a time, because part of the developmental disorder is he's not going to be able to retain a lot of information at one time. So I would encourage you to start with one thing. Tell him one thing that he can help you with and leave it at that. Unfortunately, many Asperger's men are genetically wired to reject lists. And if you're an NT wife, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If that describes your man, then don't give him a list of things to do. Now you might be thinking, what's the difference between a list and a chore chart? Well, a list is not particularly visual. I mean, I know you have to read it, but here's a list, so to speak, as compared to a chore chart. The other thing that would be helpful, when possible, is to let him decide the timeline. This may sound counterintuitive, but it works. Sometimes males need to feel like they're in control, even NT males. But the Asperger's brain, male brain, really feels like they need to be in control. And the minute they feel threatened, they flee, and you're never going to get the job done that you want him to do. If your Aspie takes off because he feels like he's lost control. It would be easier and a lot less painful to just go beat your head against a brick wall than to try to get him to complete the task. Now, some of you are thinking, well, if I let him have his timeline, it'll never get done. Well, I'm not talking about pushing the task 2 or 3 days out or next week. We're talking about a 24-hour timeline here. So you can say, this is what I like for you, this is what I need you to do, and it doesn't have to be done, immediately, sometime within the next 24 hours. If you could get that done, I'd appreciate that. So these are just a few little simple things. It's nothing profound here, nothing even new to you, but these are very important things to consider, and they're simple things, but sometimes the simple things are the best things. And there's a link below this video that will take you to an article where there's more information on how you can get your Asperger's partner to share the load. Okay? Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Hey guys, this is Mark Hutten with AdultAspergersChat.com, and today I want to talk to those individuals on the autism spectrum about how you may be able to improve your emotional intelligence. If you're an adult with high-functioning autism or Asperger's syndrome, and you're in a relationship with a neurotypical partner or spouse, it's very likely that he or she has complained that you're not very empathic, that you're out of touch with your feelings, and that you certainly are out of touch with how other people may feel. I think it's fair to say that most people, if not all people on the autism spectrum, lack emotional intelligence to one degree or another. Emotional intelligence is the ability to identify, assess, and control the emotions of oneself, of others, and of groups. It's the ability to harness emotions to facilitate various cognitive activities, for example, thinking and problem solving. It's also the ability to detect and decipher emotions in faces, pictures, voices, cultural artifacts, including the ability to identify one's own emotions. It's the ability to comprehend emotional language and to appreciate complicated relationships among different emotions. Now, emotional intelligence consists of only 4 attributes. Social awareness. This is understanding the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people, picking up on emotional cues, feeling comfortable socially, and recognizing the power dynamics in the group. Then there is self-management. This is being able to control impulsive feelings and behaviors, managing emotions in healthy ways, taking initiative, following through on commitments, and adapting to changing circumstances. Self-awareness. This is recognizing one's emotions and how they affect one's thoughts and behavior, knowing one's strengths and weaknesses, and having self-confidence. And lastly, there is relationship management, which is knowing how to develop and maintain good relationships, communicate clearly, inspire and influence others, and work well in a team and manage conflict. Effective education is basically learning why you have emotions, their use and misuse, and the identification of different levels of expression. Some of the skills obtained through this form of education include, but are not limited to, the ability to use humor and play to deal with challenges, to resolve conflicts positively and with confidence, to recognize and manage your emotions, and to quickly reduce stress and connect with others through nonverbal communication. This is best done under the supervision of a professional who has expertise in autism spectrum disorders, or a relationship coach. But even without a coach or a therapist, it's still possible for you to do some things on your own in the effective education department. Another important component to effective education includes learning to identify the relevant cues that indicate a particular level of emotion in facial expression, in tone of voice, in body language, and context. The face is described as the information center for emotions. So a typical error that you may have experienced in this area is not identifying which cues are relevant or redundant, or maybe even misinterpreting cues. Effective education can also include activities to detect specific degrees of emotion in others and in yourself using internal physiological cues, cognitive cues, and behavior. So you can create a list of your physiological, cognitive, and behavioral cues that indicate an increase in your emotional arousal. The degree of expression can be measured using an emotional thermometer. One of the aspects of effective education is to learn how to perceive your early warning signals that indicate emotional arousal that may need cognitive control. Now, when a particular emotion and the levels of expression are understood, the next component of effective education is to use the same procedures for a contrasting emotion. For example, after exploring happiness, the next topic explored would be sadness, or feeling relaxed would be explored before a project on feeling anxious, and so on. So in this way, you are learning to understand that certain thoughts or emotions are antidotes to other feelings. For example, some activities associated with feeling happy may be used to counteract feeling sad. So in a nutshell, through the use of effective education, you can begin the process of developing emotional intelligence. And in an ideal world, you would develop the following skills in the end: taking responsibility for your own emotions and happiness, showing respect by respecting other people's feelings, paying attention to nonverbal communication. For example, you would want to watch faces, listen to tone of voice, take note of body language, and so on. Looking for the humor or life lesson in a negative situation, listening twice as much as you speak, learning to relax when your emotions are running high, getting up and moving when you're feeling down, examining your feelings rather than the actions or motives of others, developing constructive coping skills for specific moods, being honest with yourself, avoiding people who don't respect your feelings, and lastly, acknowledging your negative feelings, looking for their source, and coming up with a way to solve the underlying problem.
If you would like to dig deeper into this business of effective education and developing some emotional intelligence, then there's a link below this video. We have an ongoing men's group. It's a men's only group for those on the autism spectrum, and it will be especially helpful for those who are trying to mend fences with their neurotypical partners, who blame them for being out of touch with their feelings, being insensitive, uncaring, and so on. You've heard it before, right? Click on the link below, guys, and register. I hope to see you in the next group.
Okay, well, with respect to meltdowns, sometimes they're shutdowns, sometimes they're adult temper tantrums, it would be good to think in terms of prevention rather than intervention, because most of the time, and I'm speaking in generalities here, we'll use the example of the man with ASD, when he's already in the throes of something that, and by the way, it's always anxiety based. It would be good to think in terms of prevention, because once the individual with ASD is already triggered, you're just going to have to write it out at that point, because it's all anxiety based. Whenever gets angry, you can be assured that what you're seeing is the anger, but what's underneath the anger is anxiety. And the anger is nothing more than an anxiety reduction technique. And so when he gets angry, he's already been triggered, and it's going to be really hard to put that bullet back in the gun at that point. And I'm not saying that intervention is never a usable strategy, but it's certainly the hard route to go, and it's going to be highly ineffective a lot of the time. So the best thing to do is think in terms of prevention. And so what he could begin to do, if he would be willing, would be to start a trigger journal. And I don't think it would be a 100-page journal, because I find that most of the time whoever he is, there's usually a finite set of triggers, and there's a huge crossover. So you might think, well, he gets triggered by this, and this. But if you look a little deeper, you realize that a lot of those things are the same thing. And so he probably only has 3 to 5 triggers. I'm going to make up some examples, simple examples that you can wrap your brain around. Maybe a hectic, chaotic, noisy environment would be one. Maybe being hit by surprises by his NT wife, who charges in there and says, oh, well, we need to do this now. When he's over here doing his own thing, minding his own business, and then she charges in there, now he's supposed to stop what he's doing and tend to whatever she wants. So unwanted interruption might be another example of a trigger. Coming home from a hard day at work, and you're beat, and he just wants to go somewhere by himself and de-escalate a little bit and kind of charge his battery, because social situations drain his battery. And so if he comes home from a difficult day at work, his battery's dead, and he may need some time alone just to recharge a little bit before he tries to get involved with the family in conversation or whatever. Those are just 3 easy examples. And so the first thing you want to do is come up with a trigger journal, and then part of that journal then would be some alternative choices. So instead of, trigger 1 is this, and what I usually do when I get triggered that way is I yell at my wife. First of all, you'd want to identify when the trigger happens, because then you'd have a propensity to get angry. So you would want to come up with something. Okay, maybe instead of yelling at my wife, I could simply tell her, I've been triggered, this thing really upset me, and I'm just letting you know I'm kind of effed up right now, and I need you to be a little patient with me because I'm having a hard time watching my tongue. But in an ideal world, you would anticipate the trigger. You would know, okay, we're going to go do this thing now, and sometimes that triggers me, and so I'm going to be on alert walking into this situation knowing that I'm at risk of being triggered. So the trigger journal is most effective in that you can anticipate things that might be said or done that would trigger you, and if possible, avoid it altogether. You want to write down the triggers, and then you would want to look for themes amongst those triggers. So, for example, if he had 10 things in his journal that were triggers, it wouldn't take much of an investigator to realize, okay, well, these 3 are similar, and those 4 are similar, and these 2 are similar. So even though they would be separate incidents, if you looked a little deeper, you would realize it was only maybe 3 triggers.
So in working with adults on the autism spectrum, sometimes we get into this business of attribution retraining, and that's a fancy term for basically helping individuals who have mind-blindness, alexithymia, and other traits of the disorder such as executive function deficits and so on, helps these individuals to check the evidence before reacting. Because if you are a spouse of someone on the autism spectrum, you may have been in a situation where you've said something that in your mind was totally 100% neutral and harmless, but it downloaded in his mind as criticism, or that you're being controlling or something along those lines. So one common effect of misinterpretation for people on the autism spectrum is the development of distrust in others. And honestly, in some cases, it's even what I would refer to as a mild form of paranoia. And this is largely due to impaired theory of mind skills in the cognitive profile of these individuals on the autism spectrum. Now, a theory of mind is the ability that we all have in order to make sense of the world we live in. Every person's thoughts, knowledge, beliefs, desires, and so on make up his or her own unique theory of mind. Now, people on the autism spectrum have difficulty conceptualizing and appreciating the thoughts and feelings of others. And this is called mind-blindness. And it's this mind-blindness thing that makes it difficult for these individuals to be able to relate to and understand the behaviors of you, the NT spouse, and others as well, co-workers, other family members, and so on. By failing to account for others' perspectives, individuals on the autism spectrum tend to misinterpret their messages. And for the NT spouses listening to this video, you've lived it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mind blindness also means that the individual with ASD level 1 has difficulty in distinguishing whether someone's actions are intentional or accidental. Okay? So neurotypical people will know from the context, body language, facial cues, and character of the other person involved that the intent was not to cause distress, injury, criticism, but people on the autism spectrum often focus primarily on the act and the consequences. For example, he bumped into me and it hurt, and so it was intentional. Whereas neurotypical people would consider the circumstances. For example, he was running, he tripped, he accidentally fell into me. So the neurotypical is able to fill in the blank with something that makes a little more sense than conclusion jumping.
with individuals on the high end of autism, there may need to be training in this business of checking the evidence before overreacting to the event or the person in question. And this training is called attribution training. The mind-blind individual often blames others exclusively and tends not to consider his own contribution, or he can excessively blame himself for the events. So it could be attributed on either extreme. Now, one aspect of ASD is a tendency for some of these individuals to adopt an attitude of arrogance, where the perceived focus of control is always external. So when the ASD individual believes that he was a victim of some form of injustice, the perpetrator, in this case would be the NT spouse, may be held responsible and become the target for punishment or chastisement or a long lecture, or be on the receiving end of a shutdown or meltdown. So people on the autism spectrum have considerable difficulty accepting that they themselves have contributed to an event. But again, the opposite can occur, where he has extremely low self-esteem and feels personally responsible for too many things, which results in feelings of anxiety and guilt. So in other words, he's either taking on too much responsibility for the issue, or he's deflecting and not taking any responsibility for the issue in question. So attribution training involves establishing the reality of the situation, the various participants' contributions to an incident, and determining how the individual on the autism spectrum can change his or her perception and response. A part of social skills training for this individual will revolve around how he attributes his success, and will likely require some attribution retraining to take place. So this is where the therapist, for example, retrains the individual to think about his success as something he actively influences, not something of which he is a victim. Now, there are 4 main factors to which we can attribute success or failure, and those are effort, ability, luck, and task difficulty. So we'll look at each of these in turn. A person attributing effort may say something along the lines of, I worked hard and that's why I did so good, or I was lazy and that's why I didn't accomplish my goal. So here I am attributing effort to the outcome. A person attributing ability may say something along the lines of, I'm so stupid, that's why I failed, or I'm so intelligent and that's why I succeeded. So here I would be attributing the outcome to my ability. A person attributing luck may say something along the lines of, I was wearing my lucky shirt today, and so that's why I won the game, or I wasn't wearing my lucky shirt today and that's why I lost the game. So here I'm attributing luck to the outcome. And lastly, there's task difficulty. So if I'm attributing task difficulty, I may say something along the lines of, the test was so easy, that's why I passed, or the test was really super hard and that's why I failed. So there I'm attributing task difficulty to the outcome. You know, people don't have any control over luck or task difficulty, and ability is gained through gaining knowledge and skills. So therefore, the only aspect that people can directly influence on a regular basis is their effort. And this is where attribution training takes place. So the individual on the autism spectrum who adopts an effort-based belief gains an internal locus of control, which means he believes he is in control of circumstances, and he subsequently feels empowered. Now, this is where the individual comes to believe that he has enough ability that with effort he can be successful, and that is attribution training. Cognitive restructuring enables people on the autism spectrum to correct distorted conceptualizations and dysfunctional beliefs. The process involves challenging their current thinking with logical evidence and ensuring the rationalization
and cognitive control of their emotions. Now, the first stage of cognitive restructuring is to establish the evidence for a particular belief. People on the autism spectrum often make false assumptions of their circumstances and the intentions of others, and they have a tendency to make a literal interpretation, and a casual comment may be taken out of context or may be taken to the extreme. All people are vulnerable to distorted conceptualizations, but people on the autism spectrum are less able to put things in perspective, to seek clarification, and to consider alternative explanations or responses. So neurotypical spouses can encourage their autistic spouse to be more flexible in their thinking and to seek clarification using questions or comments such as, "Are you joking?" or "I'm confused about what you just said." Such comments also can be used when misinterpreting someone's intentions, such as, "Did you do that deliberately?" And to rescue the situation after they've made an inappropriate response with a comment such as, "I'm sorry I offended you," or, "Oh, what should I have done instead?" One common effect of misinterpretation is the development of paranoia. The person on the autism spectrum can have difficulty distinguishing between accidental or deliberate intent. Now, neurotypical people will know from the context, body language, and character of the other person involved that the intent was not to cause distress or injury. However, people on the spectrum can focus primarily on the act and the consequence. So people on the spectrum may need to be trained in checking the evidence before responding and developing more accurate mind-reading skills. Cognitive restructuring also includes a process known as attribution retraining. The person on the spectrum may blame others exclusively and not consider his own contribution, or he can excessively blame himself for events. One aspect of ASD is a tendency for some people to adopt an attitude of arrogance or omnipotence where the perceived focus of control is external. For example, the person may have the thought, "I have no control." Rather, outside circumstances control me. Specific individuals are held responsible and become the target for retribution or punishment. And these individuals have considerable difficulty accepting that they themselves have contributed to the event. The opposite can occur when the person on the spectrum has extremely low self-esteem and feels personally responsible, which results in feelings of anxiety and guilt. Attribution retraining involves establishing the reality of the situation, the various participants' contributions to an incident, and determining how the individual can change his perception and response. Hey guys, this is Mark Hutten with AdultAspergersChat.com, and today I want to talk to you guys about re-injuring the relationship. So, back in the day when you first got together, there was appreciation for one another, wasn't there? There was some love, compassion, and even gratitude, right? All of that is still there, but it's laying dormant because you are continuing to re-injure the relationship, if not a day-by-day basis, certainly a week-by-week basis. Think of it like this. If you were to stub your toe this morning, it would be swollen, black and blue. You may have even fractured your toe a little bit, but if you wrap it, if you nurture it, if you walk softly, it will heal itself, right? But if you re-injured it again tomorrow, and then again the day after, it would never heal. In fact, it would progressively get worse because you're injuring it faster than it can heal. So with the relationship, the re-injury occurs when you replay past hurts. So when you review the past injuries, things that were said and done that were hurtful, that's the content memory. You also replay the emotional memory. In other words, you feel bad all over again, just like you did when the actual event happened. This now influences how you speak to one another and how you behave to one another today. Reviewing those past hurts chronically, in some cases, feeling the pain all over again, contaminates how you speak to one another and behave toward one another today. That's re-injury. You're not talking to one another today like you did 5-10 years ago, for example. Everything is influenced from past hurts. So, if you were to stop re-injuring the relationship,
the sense of well-being and appreciation that was there in the beginning will come back, just like a cork that you pushed down into the water, and you finally let go of that cork, and it will float right back to the top again. So when you stop re-injuring the relationship, you will get back to a semblance of how it was in the beginning, where there was appreciation, there was love, there was compassion, there was gratitude. And again, how do you stop re-injuring? You stop chronically reviewing your past hurts, which means now you're chronically feeling the pain all over again, which means now the way you talk to one another and behave towards one another is contaminated by the past. That's the re-injury that we want to eliminate. Hope that makes sense, guys. I have an NT ladies only group, an ASD men's only group, and a neurodiverse couples group. You're welcome to join, and there will be links underneath this video where you can sign up. Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Mark Hutten with AspergersChat.com, and one of the things that I run into a lot with couples where one is affected by Asperger's syndrome and the other partner or spouse is a neurotypical is the neurotypical spouse understands that her Asperger's husband, for example, is hardwired in a certain way and that he does have a developmental disorder. And then she's wondering, okay, well, given that he has these challenges or deficits, how are we ever going to communicate? How is he ever going to understand how I feel or meet my emotional needs? Well, your first line of defense is obviously to go get counseling from a marriage and family therapist who has experience with autism spectrum disorders. I run into so many situations where they have sought counseling from a neurotypical therapist who offers neurotypical advice, which is going to result in, one of the parties, since they're not wired neurotypically, one of the parties are totally not going to understand, how to follow through with this plan because it's not in alignment with how they think. So the first thing to do is get with somebody who knows what they're talking about with respect to being sensitive to the partner with Asperger's syndrome, specifically the mind-blindness issues, alexithymia, sensory sensitivities, executive function deficits, and so on. It would be a whole lot easier and a lot less painful to just go beat your head against a brick wall than to seek neurotypical advice from a neurotypical therapist and start employing neurotypical strategies in your marriage. If you've tried it, you know it doesn't work, okay? So there's so many things that can be done. I just want to mention two in this video here. One of the first lines of defense is when you are going to have a heavy-handed conversation with your Asperger's husband, you want to give him a heads up that there is going to be a conversation that might be a little stressful. So you don't hit him with a surprise, because people with Asperger's, they don't like change and they don't like surprises. The next thing you want to do when both of you, when you come into this heavy-handed conversation that has the potential for stress and anxiety that can result in a fight, you want to view yourselves as team players. More specifically, you want to come into this conversation that has the potential for a meltdown or a shutdown or however it ends badly. You want to come into that conversation with the mindset of, we're going to pretend as if we're business partners. You are a team player. If you were on a professional football team, you wouldn't treat one of your team players the way you do your spouse. If you were the co-owner of a business, you wouldn't treat your business partner the same way you treat your spouse. So you want to view any heavy-handed conversations, especially when it has something to do with finances or the kids, you want to come in with the mindset that we're dealing with this like it's a business, and your family is a business in a sense. The other thing that I want to mention in this short video is when you do have to have this heavy-handed conversation that has the potential for disaster, I find it very helpful to have a brisk walk while you're having the conversation, because I have found that when people are having a stressful conversation, their breathing becomes very shallow, and in some cases they stop breathing altogether, which just reinforces the brain's perception that there's really a threat at hand. So when you have a brisk walk, you're forced to breathe while you're talking. And there's something about breath work while you're having discussion that tends to keep things a little more on the even keel. You could think of it like this. You can't talk and take a drink of water at the same time. They're incompatible. And similarly, it's hard to have a really knockdown, drag-out fight when you're breathing fairly heavy. So something about oxygenating the brain does help bring the anxiety down to a more tolerable level where you still have a semblance of a rational brain as you're trying to discuss a particular problem and come up with a solution. So there's multiple things that can be done in a situation where your partner is limited, so to speak, when he has alexithymia issues, mind-blindness, executive function problems, sensory sensitivities, and 3 or 4 other things that we could talk about that make it a real challenge for him to keep a rational head when discussing stressful topics. But the 2 main things that I want you to take away from this video are view one another as business partners, and also when you're having this rather stressful conversation, do it while you have a brisk walk, okay? There's no reason why you can't. Even in the wintertime, you put on your coats, walk around the block or whatever, and have that conversation there. So there's numerous other ways to actually get a connection between the 2 of you that yields a desirable result. And I'm just mentioning these 2. If you click on the link below, we can discuss multiple ways to where you can have a good connection with your partners such that troubleshooting doesn't end in knockdown, drag out, meltdowns, shutdowns, rage, and fights. Okay? Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, this is Mark Hutten with AdultAsperger'sChat.com, and I got an email from a neurotypical wife, and she's asking a question about her Asperger's husband. And she states, you talk about how the Asperger's brain is wired differently. So what is it about my husband's brain that is wired so differently that he seems totally unable to understand how I feel? Okay, well, first of all, I doubt that he totally doesn't understand how you feel, but he may give you the impression that he has no clue, and quite honestly, in many cases, he probably has no clue. So we need to look at 2 things really, mind-blindness and alexithymia. Now these are 2 traits that are often found in Asperger's and high-functioning autism. You can think of mind-blindness as the inability to predict the beliefs and intentions of others, and you can think of alexithymia as the inability to identify and interpret emotional signals in others and also in one's self. And this in turn reduces the ability to be empathically attuned to others. So let's look at each of these in turn. We'll look at mind blindness first. So mind blindness is essentially the opposite of empathy, and it can be described as an inability to develop an awareness of what's in the mind of another person. The typical brain, for example, let's say you are talking to somebody and they have a certain facial expression and they have certain body language and they have a certain tone of voice, and you're weighing all that in conjunction with their actual words, and you may be able to be pretty good at predicting, how that person is feeling or what they're thinking or what their general attitude is. Well, people with mind blindness, they don't have that ability. So generally speaking, people with mind blindness are delayed in developing what is called a theory of mind. Another way of saying this is the person with mind blindness can't conceptualize, understand, or predict emotional states in other people. Now, alexithymia can be described as a state of deficiency in understanding, processing, or describing emotions. The person with alexithymia, they have trouble imagining outcomes. They have difficulty predicting how their behavior is going to impact others. They have trouble describing feelings to other people. They're not sure how they feel. They're not sure how you feel. They have difficulty identifying feelings and distinguishing between feelings and the bodily sensations associated with those feelings. Now, there's 2 kinds of alexithymia. There's what is called primary alexithymia, and we'll just call it an ongoing psychological trait that does not alter over time. And that speaks to the business of the Asperger's brain being hardwired. That is something that can't be fixed. But then there's secondary alexithymia, and that is a state-dependent situation. And it usually disappears after the evoking stressful situation has changed. So that second version of alexithymia depends on the situation. Now, the typical deficiencies that result from alexithymia, as I mentioned a little bit ago, can include a lack of imagination, lack of intuition, lack of empathy, and it also results in the person with Asperger's being more driven towards relating to objects and tasks rather than people. Additionally, it would be concrete, realistic, logical thinking, often to the exclusion of emotional responses to problems. You may find that your Asperger's man is highly logical. There's few dreams or fantasies due to this business of having a restricted imagination. They may treat themselves as robots. They have problems identifying, describing, and working with one's own feelings. And they have a real problem identifying, describing, and working with their partner's feelings. So alexithymia creates interpersonal problems because these individuals avoid emotionally close relationships, or if they do form relationships with others, they tend to position themselves in either a dependent, dominant, or impersonal position. And the reason they do that is because they want the relationship to remain superficial. A secondary issue related to alexithymia involves the inability to identify and modulate strong emotions. And that's usually with the Asperger's man, anger. And so the inability to modulate emotions leaves the person prone to sudden affective outbursts such as rage, meltdowns, or in some cases, shutdowns. So if your situation is like most that I hear about, it's not uncommon for your husband to go into meltdowns. Looks like an adult version of a temper tantrum, raging and being very critical of you. So in most cases, the individual with Asperger's is having a lot of anxiety, and they want to release that anxiety because anxiety is nothing more than a bunch of pent-up, uncomfortable emotions. And so they tend to want to have a verbal vomit on their partner to discharge this uncomfortable, anxious feeling. And unfortunately, when they discharge their anger and their anxiety onto their partner, they feel better, but their partner now feels like shit, quite honestly, because they've been used as a scapegoat and a whipping post. Oftentimes when the Asperger's person goes into the meltdown or rage, they will report a feeling of being unwillingly detached from the world. In other words, they feel a disconnect, and it's like they didn't really volunteer for this disconnect. It can just look like a pure case of emotional abuse to the observer, but what's really going on is the Asperger's, in this case Asperger's man, is having a real internal struggle, and he's trying to figure out a way to discharge this anxiety, and unfortunately this is done in a very dysfunctional way. It's his destructive coping mechanism. Now, people with mind-blindness and alexithymia, when they become an adult, they do have great difficulty finding a life partner or getting married due to poor social skills. Because if you have mind-blindness and you're not really attuned to what other people might be feeling, and you struggle with empathy, and if you have alexithymia, which you're in a situation where you're almost overly logical, clearly you can understand why that would get in the way of social skills. And a relationship is, by definition, exchanging social interaction. The complexity and inconsistency of the social world often poses extreme challenges to individuals with this mind blindness and alexithymia business. So that doesn't necessarily help you feel better, but it may help you understand the deficits that your husband has that appear to make him selfish, uncaring, insensitive. That's what it looks like, and that's what it feels like, and that's totally understandable. However, if you look deeper, you will realize that indeed there is some brain wiring that is different, that prevents him from relating to you in a more loving, compassionate way. Oftentimes, when you see the ugly side of your husband, what's really going on inside him is he's struggling to comprehend what's going on in a problematic situation, and also dealing with the anxiety associated with not being able to comprehend what's going on in a social situation. Hey guys, this is Mark. Click on the join button underneath any of my videos, then click on members only videos, and then click on join. And for $9.99 a month, you'll have access to members only videos, which are excerpts from previous workshops I've conducted for NT partners, ASD partners, and the neurodiverse couple. New videos will be uploaded weekly. Hey guys, this is Mark. I'm taking on some new clients. There's my email address right there.
I do have about a 4-week waiting period. So if you'll email me, I'll put you on my waiting list. And in approximately 4 weeks from today, we'll be able to meet face-to-face using Zoom or Skype. And we can talk about the relationship difficulties you're having in your neurodiverse marriage where one person is autistic, the other one is not. And we will come up with some preliminary intervention strategies to do some marital conflict repair. So feel free to email me and we'll get started soon. I've been working with people online for 25 plus years. So I've been around the block a time or two, and so I look forward to hearing from you.